Of documents leading to countless questions for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
I think this drip feed of revelations is drawing out the agony. I think it's also a nail in his coffin in terms of him having to speak to the authorities, both here and in the...
Before you read further, make sure you're subscribed to FameX and share your thoughts in the comments below. In just a few days, the former Duke of York will be asked to leave Royal Lodge, the Windsor home where he has lived for over 20 years. Sources who once worked behind palace walls say it's unlikely many staff will feel sad about his exit. For a long time, quiet stories have circulated about what Andrew was really like as a boss. Not the public appearances or staged walks, but his private conduct, his attitude, his anger, and his sense of privilege. As he prepares to leave Royal Lodge on the King's orders and relocate to a far smaller home in Norfolk, many of those old accounts are coming back into focus. When viewed together, they create an uneasy picture of how Andrew treated the people employed to serve him. Raised as the Queen's second son and once seen as her favorite, Andrew grew up with power, status, and special access. According to several reports, that position influenced how he saw staff, not as skilled professionals, but as people expected to obey without question.
Prince Andrew's undoing is not a subplot. It's the spine of a much larger story about power, protection, and a monarchy struggling to outrun its own blind spot.
Author Andrew Lownie, who spent years speaking with former palace workers for his book The Rise and Fall of the House of York, says Andrew believed staff existed to serve, not to challenge him. Today, we're looking at 6 of Andrew's worst moments involving staff, including harsh insults, angry outbursts, and the disturbing bedroom rule. One of the people Lownie interviewed was Colin Burgess, a former equerry to the Queen Mother. Burgess said he saw Andrew roughly once a month at Clarence House. What stood out most was the way Andrew addressed staff, not with respect or teamwork, but like a commanding officer giving orders. Burgess recalled Andrew snapping phrases such as, "I want this done now," or "make sure that S finished by a certain time." According to him, Andrew's most common words were simply, "Do it." No explanation, no discussion. Burgess compared this behavior with the Queen Mother and King Charles, both of whom he said treated staff with dignity and respect. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to FameX if you want more stories like this.
An ex-royal staff member has opened up about his time working at Buckingham Palace. Dan Ottaway, who served as a chef, claims that out of all of the royals that he catered for, Prince Andrew was difficult and more demanding than others. I mean, he's certainly not getting a good rap.
In his opinion, the contrast could not have been clearer. But some stories go beyond harsh tone and describe behavior many staff found deeply humiliating. Based on Lownie's reporting, Andrew required housemaids to climb 4 flights of stairs every morning just to open his bedroom curtains, even while he remained in bed nearby. There was no real need for this routine. It was simply expected. One former insider went further, saying Andrew's bedroom habits as a single man were something staff feared dealing with. They claimed maids often found crumpled, used tissues left around the bed each morning, which they were expected to clean while making it. It's uncomfortable to discuss, but it appears repeatedly in staff accounts, which is why it continues to surface. Then there is the story that became almost legendary, the teddy bears. Former staff member Charlotte Briggs said Andrew owned 72 teddy bears that had to be placed on his bed in a very precise order. They had to follow size order, exact positioning, and there was no room for error.
He certainly isn't. Nobody's saying a nice word about him, are they? They're working on that sort of basis. So what happened is he's shared this Dan Ottaway. He's shared his insights into the royal family life. He's now holding a position as an executive chef in a luxury hotel. And what he says is, look, everybody loved the royals. He loved serving them for many, many years. But Prince Andrew was quite difficult. And
She told The Sun that from her very first day on the job, she was given strict instructions on how the bears should be arranged. She said the rules were repeatedly drilled into her. She even claimed she received an entire day of training just to learn the correct setup. If even one bear was misplaced, Andrew would lose his temper. Briggs said it took her about 30 minutes each time to position them properly. She described it as the strangest task she had ever been paid to perform. Her account was supported by former Royal Protection Officer Paul Page, who said there was a laminated handwritten guide titled DY Bed, with step-by-step points for turn-down and bed making. A sketch was kept nearby to make sure staff followed it exactly. Page told ITV that Andrew would shout and scream if the bears were not arranged as instructed, but it wasn't only objects that triggered his anger. There are also several accounts of Andrew making deeply personal remarks toward staff. Royal expert Tom Quinn reported that Andrew once had a staff member removed because he disliked a mole on the man's face. Another worker was allegedly dismissed for wearing a nylon tie. In Quinn's book Yes Ma'am, The Secret Life of Royal Servants, former employees described Andrew as controlling, arrogant, and prone to acting like what one called a classic school bully. One servant recalled that Andrew always seemed bitter about his place in the family, never being the firstborn or the heir. They believed that resentment shaped how he behaved behind closed doors. The same staffer said if Andrew liked someone, he could be loyal and encouraging. But the moment something went wrong or wasn't done exactly his way, he became hostile and domineering. After his public downfall following his links to Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew's private world was said to shrink sharply.
He began this year as a prince and he ends it as a civilian. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has paid a heavy price for his friendship with the disgraced billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew denies any wrongdoing, but there are repeated calls now for him to tell the full story of that relationship.
Multiple reports suggest that Andrew and his former wife Sarah Ferguson lived a quiet and largely isolated life inside Royal Lodge. He is described as drifting through the vast estate with little purpose, living what one source called a state of emotional stagnation. At 65, his routine was said to include waking late, eating breakfast served by staff, and then spending hours in a sitting room dominated by a massive wall-sized screen. There, he reportedly played video games or watched war movies and golf broadcasts. Despite losing his royal duties and public standing, several accounts claim Andrew remained in denial about his reduced role. According to Rob Shooter's Shooter Scoop, life inside Royal Lodge remained unchanged. One household source said staff were still expected to call him Your Royal Highness and bow or curtsy when entering the room. The source claimed Andrew insisted palace rules did not apply inside his home, arguing it was his birthright and beyond the king's control. This matches claims in Lownie's book, where staff said they were told to bow whenever Andrew entered a room. If someone forgot, Andrew would allegedly say, "Let's try that again," then leave and re-enter so the gesture could be done correctly. One of the most troubling stories involves a verbal attack on a long-serving household official. In his 2025 biography, Lownie describes an incident involving David Anderson, former head of household at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland. After a powerful storm in 2005, Andrew asked if there had been damage. Anderson replied that a tree planted by the Queen Mother had been affected. According to the book, Andrew paused, then mocked him by saying, "Did you mean Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother?" When Anderson explained he had joined royal service in 1984, Andrew allegedly asked how he could have worked that long and still not know how to refer to her properly. He then reportedly shouted an obscenity and ordered Anderson out of the room. This was a man with over 2 decades of service, dismissed in moments. Now, as Andrew prepares to leave Royal Lodge and relocate to the much smaller Marsh Farm property, reports say he will no longer have full-time staff. The king has reportedly offered limited help, including a cleaner, groundsman, and cook on an occasional basis. Sources say Andrew has not taken this well. For someone who spent decades surrounded by staff, ceremony, and unquestioned respect, the change may be difficult. So now I want to hear from you. Do these stories shock you, or do they simply confirm what many already believed about Andrew behind closed doors? And do you think this move truly signals the end of his royal lifestyle, or will he continue clinging to it in private? Share your thoughts below, and for more royal family stories, make sure you're subscribed to FameX.